Hi, I'm Russell Cummings. I wanted to take you through a quick summary of your Harrison assessment report. We'll do a quick video review, which is a complement to the larger written report that you'll get, and we're going to highlight a couple of key areas here. So let me tell you a little bit about Harrison. So Harrison Assessments were founded in 1990 by Dr. Dan Harrison. It uses a unique methodology to assess your preferences for over 175 behavioural traits. So instead of the normal sort of 8 or 16 traits, we look at 175 behavioural traits. Really importantly, it looks at your preferences, so it doesn't rate you against anybody except yourself. So it tells us what you prefer to do, and the methodology and the thinking there is that you're going to be better at things that you prefer to do. But then again, sometimes your score is just a score of what you prefer to do. It's not a measure of the quality of how you do things, so you need some insight into that sort of stuff. It provides us a great tool for understanding yourself and how you operate socially and in business operations. It allows us also to compare your traits to the key traits required to perform a particular role or job. So if part of Harrison, you do a questionnaire, we can then compare your answers in that questionnaire against a standard job role that we set up. So we would set up, we call it a job success formula, and we set up a particular formula that identifies the key traits. So the 20 years of experience, we've built quite a library of traits for particular jobs, and we use this to actually assess how you might stack up against in a particular role or job. Overall, it can give you some great understanding in the areas where you may need to improve or change. It has a wide range of reports and users, so it comes with quite a comprehensive recruiting system, so you can use it to sort and sift people for you from your advertising and your recruiting campaigns. We can use it for development and coaching of individuals, and also to help them with their career planning. So it's quite a lot of tools and uses we can get from the one piece of information. One of the key differences about Harrison is its use of what they call paradox technology. So many assessment tools will assess you against two diametrically opposed traits, for example, introvert and extrovert, and it will give you a score where you rate somewhere in the middle or somewhere else, and it basically says you're one or the other. What Dr. Harrison has worked out is that it's actually possible to score along for particular traits. So you can actually score on both the A and B axis, and if you plot them differently, and then you can get some different results out of it. So Dr. Harrison has said, well, if you've got a dynamic trait and then a less gentle trait, so it's a yin-yang thing, you will find that if you score highly for both of them, you're in an area that we call balanced versatility. If you score highly for the dynamic trait, you tend to have an aggressive imbalance. Score for the gentle trait, you tend to have a passive imbalance, or if you score low on both of them, what we call a balanced deficiency. To give an example, if we look at communication, and we say that communication is driven by a couple of traits around your frankness, or your tendency to be straightforward and direct to the point, and your ability to be diplomatic, and that's a tendency to state things in a tactful manner or tactful way. And in this example here, that person has scored quite low in terms of frankness, in terms of diplomatic, and where that puts them in is that red dot in the blue circle there, which means it plots them fairly comfortably in that avoids communication thing. So this person here would tend to avoid communication with others. Now the size of the blue circle, the blue sort of sphere around the red dot, indicates the level of influence that you may have, and you may stroll into other quadrants, and you can see this person at times could be a lot more diplomatic, and at times could be a lot more frank. The red fuzzy thing, which is in the top left hand corner, shows where this person will go to under stress, and in this case they become far more blunt in their communication style. So under stress they'll become, off the scale, frank and very blunt. The dark fuzzy area in the bottom right hand corner indicates that in times this person will use frankness or bluntness as a tool to divert attention away from a particular issue. So they use it to be evasive. So they use bluntness as a tool to be evasive at different times. So as you can see, there's a wealth of information that we include in just this one graph, and the paradox report is only one part of your assessment. So we will go through your paradox report. We'll also look at your engagement and retention report. So in this one we look at sort of 8 key areas around engaging and retaining people in your business, and we'll look at how you score in different areas to see if there's any areas where we need to focus attention. And then also as I mentioned, with Harrison, what we do is we can assess you against a particular job. So we can actually set up all the traits, and we break those traits up into essential traits. So they're the traits that you require. The higher score is normally better in that particular job. Desirable traits are traits that would be good if you've got them. If you don't have them, it's actually a bit of a problem. So you score a bit more lowly if they don't take points away from you effectively if you don't have those traits. And then we've got a whole series of traits to avoid, which have quite a big impact on the job. So there's some traits you want to avoid in a particular position, and we'll look through those when we get to your report. It gives us an overall job suitability score. Anything over 70 is a possible fit, or probably 65 is a possible fit, and anything over 75 is quite a tight fit for that job. And then we'll look at each individual trait to just help determine what sort of fit you are for these sort of things. So as you can see, we're going to go through quite a lot of stuff. Let's take some time now and have a look through your particular report at some of the highlights for you. This is an example report built around a fictitious job applicant called Andrew Jones, and Andrew has applied for the position with our firm, which is a Chief Operations Officer. So we've just used the standard Chief Operations Officer job success formula here, but in reality we would tailor a job success formula specifically for the position that Andrew has applied for. But in this situation, you can see that in this job success analysis that Andrew's job fit is about 67%. Important to notice here that Andrew was 99.2% consistent in answering the questionnaire. So he answered the questionnaire very truthfully, so you can expect that this would provide us with a strong indication of what his behavioural traits really are. If you look at the scale here, 67% puts him in this sort of possible fit area. Normally anybody up close to 80% is somebody that we would shortlist. Hopefully we would have other applicants that would be a higher score than Andrew in this case. But let's just have a look at his overall report. So if you look at the job success analysis, in the job success analysis we've identified some essential traits, up to 12 traits that are absolutely essential for this job. Things like you want your Chief Operations Officer to take initiative, to be analytical, to analyse pitfalls. Now you can see the scale here. It basically says the midline is no impact, and the dark sort of circle is where Andrew scored. So he scored 8.7 on this one, which is a positive movement. So I'll have a slight to moderate positive impact on his ability to do the job. But you can see analyse pitfalls, that Andrew doesn't particularly enjoy analysing pitfalls. So his behaviour is given a choice. His preference is not to analyse the pitfalls and to be optimistic. You can see that it will have a sort of moderate to substantial impact on his ability to do the job or his enjoyment of the job. Okay, so if we look down, there's some issues here. He's not particularly strong in planning. He's not particularly well organised, and they're the sort of key traits. So if you look at those key traits, not particularly good at analysing pitfalls, not particularly well organised, not particularly fond of planning. If we look at desirable traits, so these are traits that where a low score can hinder your performance, but a positive score doesn't actually make them any better. So we want to look for areas here where we have a negative impact. You can see a collaboration. He's not particularly collaborative, but it doesn't have much of an impact on his ability to do the job. But if we slide down further here, we start to see that writing and language. If he needs to write reports, Andrew is not particularly comfortable writing reports and would prefer to do lots of other things rather than write reports. If that's important for this job, then that's going to be a problem. He's also quite precise. He's not very precise. So there's a degree of precision required around this job, but then it's going to have an impact on them as well. We also look at traits to avoid. So these are ones where we just, having a high score in them can actually significantly hinder their performance in this job. You can see from this one in a big red area here that Andrew is blindly optimistic. So he looks for the positive in everything without taking some of the risks into consideration, not what you really want to have in a manager. He's also quite impulsive. Those two tendencies often go together, and they're traits that you would like to avoid in this position. He's also very permissive. So in a management position, this is really important because that's the tendency for him not to enforce the rules or make corrections in people's behaviour. So really what it's saying is he'd like to be everybody's friend, and that he'd rather not enforce the rules, and he will let people get away with a whole heap of different things. But we will discuss this further when we get to the paradox report in just a minute. Okay, so that's the job success analysis. Andrew, in this case, a low score certainly wouldn't be at the top of the list for our short list with a score of 67%. All right, so if we look at Andrew's paradox graph, you'll notice there are 12 elements here, from opinions and through to strategic acumen. Each of these paradox elements is picked up by two traits, and their scores. The interaction between those scores gives us some insights into how his behaviours will be in the management role. So let's just go through each of them. So this is the paradox graph. I'll just make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. So if we look across here in terms of initiating and getting projects up and away, you can see that Andrew is reasonably balanced here in terms of being certain and being open, reflective. So he's quite confident in his own opinions, but he's also happy to take on the opinions of others and take those into consideration at different times. You can see here that these two blue elements, they indicate that they are desirable traits. The green highlighted ones are what we call essential traits for this particular role. So you can see here that in terms of his opinions, he's in this truth exploring quadrant. So this top right hand quadrant is where we'd like to see things. So he's quite balanced in that respect. In terms of his approach to decision making, he was also quite balanced as well, which is a balance between being quite analytical but also being intuitive and using your gut feel and intuition to come up with things. So he's in this logical intuition phase up here, which is the right place to be. In terms of strategic thinking, though, you can see he's quite risky in his approach to strategy, and that he's not very strong at all in analysing the pitfalls. What this ends up with is he spends a little bit of his time in the mindful courage quadrant, but most of it in this impulsive sort of quadrant over here. And this is a problem because basically it means that it'll be quite risky as a decision maker and getting things up. The black circle here indicates that maybe there is a cautious aspect to his nature, and he's actually overcompensating by being quite impulsive in that. So we look across the row here, you can see these are initiating things. So in terms of being an initiator, he's not too bad, except he will want to take excessive risks. If you're going to put him on as an employee, you want to work with him to manage those risks and make sure that he's doing a good job at analysing pitfalls before you take on any of his decisions. We move now to the next row in terms of motivating, and this is about how he motivates his team and others. You can see here in terms of himself, he's quite self-accepting in who he is, but he also has a balanced drive for self-improvement. That puts him up in this healthy self-esteem area here, which is sort of a good place to be. In terms of motivation, though, he's highly self-motivated, but he's not particularly good at managing stress. So a lot of his deliverables will be in this sort of poised achievement area, but equally a large amount of them will be in this stressed area, so that anything he achieves will come at the price of stress. And that's a problem, because when he gets stressed, a whole heap of these other red circles will start to appear. So this is saying that 50% of the time, if he's highly achieving, he's put himself under a fair bit of pressure, but he doesn't manage stress well. So unless he learns to manage stress well, he's going to have stress behaviours. What this black circle down here indicates is that in moments of respite, that he needs respite to get away from. So he's quite self-motivated and will drive himself quite hard, but in his relaxation time, he'll just turn off and switch off. Now, in terms of driving, and this is about driving the team and getting things done, you can see here he's quite low in enforcing, and this is around his ability to enforce the rules with his colleagues and his team, and he's really off the scale in terms of warmth and empathy. So when people score a 10 on Harrison, it actually becomes not a strength, but actually also starts to become a weakness. You can see in this case, he is very permissive. So that means that he will not enforce the rules. He will let people get away with a lot of bad behaviour, even non-performance, non-compliance. But this red circle up here, which is a decent sized red stress circle, if he will flip. So under stress, he will flip and become quite harsh with people. So he'll be quite permissive for a while, and then under stress, you put him under enough stress, and he'll become quite harsh and react very badly with these people. So he's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde in terms of his team. And part of that is he wants to be friendly with everybody and wants to be helpful, which will come across down here a bit further. So in terms of motivating the team, in terms of his own self-worth, he's quite good, but he does it with a high degree of stress, and then when he gets stressed, he'll be quite harsh with his team. When he's not harsh with his team, he won't be enforcing the rules with them, so he's not going to be a great team leader. People will like him. They won't quite know how to handle him at different times, because he will jump around a bit when he's stressed, and he'll let them get away with too much. In terms of implementation, about getting projects done and completed, we look at his communication style here. So you can see this sort of balance between being frank and diplomatic. He's far more diplomatic than he is frank, which you'd expect if he's quite permissive and things. So he will pick his words quite carefully, and he'll be in this forthright diplomacy area, which is not a bad place to be. So it's not too bad, but at times he will come across as being evasive, but only slightly. So his communication style is going to be reasonably good. And part of that is because, off the scale in terms of helpful. He wants to be everybody's friend, so he's not going to ruffle too many feathers. In terms of innovation, what you find is here, this is a balance between persistence, which is following through on things and getting things done, versus experimenting with different options. He's far more persistent than he's experimenting. And the paradox here is that he's up in this inventive quadrant, but at times he will be stubbornly persistent and will not give up on things that he needs to give up on. So he will push them quite hard. Yeah. And that reflects itself down here in this sort of non-finishing. So it basically means that at times he just won't give up, and he just won't finish things at different times. So there'll be a lot of unfinished projects for him. In terms of his ability to delegate, he's quite authoritative in that he looks to make decisions and is quite comfortable making decisions, but he's not particularly collaborative. So as a leader, he spends some of his time taking on board what other people say and being collaborative in his delegations and in his decision making, but a large proportion of the time he also spends just making decisions by himself without conferring with the team, and that can be a challenge. The black circle down the bottom corner down here indicates that at times he will be, if things go wrong, he will be reluctant to accept responsibility when things go wrong. All right, so in terms of implementing, he's not too badly balanced, so he will get things done. This delegation thing will cause problems with his team because he will want to make decisions without collaborating with them and taking them on board. So as a leader, he's not particularly well balanced. And this innovation thing means that he will take on more projects than he complete, and some of them he will keep going at until way past they should have stopped. In terms of maintaining, so this is about maintaining relationships and and working with people. You can see in terms of his personal power and how he uses that he's not particularly assertive. So assertive is about being focused on his own goals as opposed to the goals of others, whereas being helpful is really focused on helping other people achieve their goals. Again, he's a 10 here, which concerns me because that becomes a weakness, not necessarily a strength. And so he's too helpful. So he spends a lot of his time, he can be mutually helpful, but he will spend a lot of his time here in this sort of self-sacrificing area where he puts the needs of others well ahead of his own needs. And as a manager, that's really challenging. You want a manager that's focused on goals and can help his team move to get those goals, but he needs to be far more higher in that mutual help area rather than the self-sacrificing. The red circle in the top left-hand corner here indicates that when he feels people have taken advantage, when he gets under stress and he feels that people have taken advantage of his helpful nature, that he will become quite dominating, and this assertive side of him will really assert itself, and he will be quite high and be quite dominating. And as we mentioned before, in that stress situation, his language can be quite harsh as well with people. In terms of organisation, he's not particularly well organised, and he's very flexible. What that means in terms of organisation, he's not flexible. He's too flexible. He adjusts with things, but he's not organised enough to keep things together. So he'll be quite scattered. Combine this with his innovation capacity to take on and hang on to projects for longer than he needs to. What you'll find is that these two things go together. So really he'll end up with a lot of things that are unfinished and undone. So he's not a great completer in this space. Except when he's under stress. You put him under enough stress and he'll become rigidly organised. Okay, so he's put him under enough stress and he will become very organised. In terms of his strategic acumen, so how is he in terms of strategic thinking? Off the scale in terms of optimism. So he's blindly optimistic, doesn't spend very much time analysing the pitfalls, and this will cause real problems because he just doesn't take the time to look at the pros and cons of different things. He always looks on the positive side. So he's not particularly realistic with his optimism. And that blind optimism can actually just be a fear of things going wrong. So in order to compensate for that, he will drive things to, he will be blindly optimistic and look at the positive side of things all the time. So in terms of maintaining things, not particularly well balanced. He doesn't use his power well. He's just too helpful and self-sacrificing, so he'll have a tendency not to get things done. Not particularly well organised and blindly optimistic, so he's always looking on the bright side of things. Means that he will struggle to do that. So if we just shrink this back down a bit and just have a quick look, you can see that Andrew's traits here in terms of initiating, he's not too bad at initiating projects and getting them started. In terms of motivating the team and get him going, his personal motivation is okay, but he will do that under stress, and then he will just not enforce the rules with his team. So this whole aspect of motivation is challenged. He's not too bad at implementation, except he tends to be a bit authoritative in his decision making, and he'll tend to be a bit too persistent in taking on new things. He'll hang on to things longer than he needs to. And in terms of maintaining relationships in the team and moving things along, he's just too helpful. He wants to be everybody's friend. He's not particularly well organised, and he's blindly optimistic. So this is certainly not his strength at all. If we look down the columns, Harrison gives us another perspective. The paradox analysis says in terms of interpersonal skills, he's not too bad. Balanced in terms of opinions, in terms of himself, in terms of communication style. But in terms of power, the power tends to reside with other people rather than with himself. So he's not particularly adept at achieving his own goals. In terms of achieving things, he's a bit of a mixed bag here. Got a good decision-making approach, but in terms of motivation, does that very stressed. Hangs on to too many things, and then is just poorly organised. So, on balance, he's not going to be a great achiever for you. In terms of leadership, not a particularly strategic thinker in many ways because he risks too much and doesn't analyse pitfalls. He won't enforce the rules, so as a leader he'll be quite a poor leader. He's not a particularly good delegator. He's too authoritative and wants to make all the decisions himself. And in terms of his strategic acumen, he's just blindly optimistic, and his team won't suffer for that. So in general, you have to say an overview is he's not going to be a great senior manager for you, but he may be useful in other roles. Harrison includes some reports that look at attraction. If we want to attract this particular candidate, so if we really liked him, it actually says these are the things that you should talk about in your interview with him if you want to attract Andrew. So we want to attract Andrew that he has an extremely optimistic and cheerful attitude. He'll be more attracted to work for you if he believes the management and his supervisor also have a positive attitude. So that's really important. A strong desire to be helpful, explain ways in which he can be helpful, etc. So a lot of good tips there on doing that. Harrison also comes with an interview guide which helps you address some questions around not only his strengths but his weaknesses as well based on the Harrison assessment. Unfortunately, this example report doesn't give me the option of giving you the interview guide. In terms of engagement and retention, this is a useful sort of set of tools to look at. So if we take Andrew on board and we start thinking about what do we have to do to engage him and retain him in our business, then we can look at a couple of things. So we look at his development expectations. He wants development. He's quite an enthusiastic person. He's quite focused on self-improvement. He's not that worried about advancement within the company, but he likes challenges. So, we need to put challenges in front of him and give him plenty of development opportunities for him to self-improve, and you'll make him a happy character. In terms of appreciation, he wants appreciation. He certainly wants recognition for what he's achieved and what he's done. So you need to pair him with a manager that's going to give him those things if you want to get the best out of him. He's got a lot of warmth and empathy, so he'll be very caring of others, and will expect that in return, and he will want his opinions valued. So he'll want to know that he's been heard and that he's got good opinions, but he's not particularly collaborative. So really he's not that worried about what other people's opinions are. So that's a bit of a challenge. Remuneration here, not particularly driven by high pay or quick pay increases, and he's quite self-motivated. Obviously, if this was the other way around, he wanted very high in pay and he wanted high pay increases, but he wasn't self-motivated, then you would have some challenges with him. In terms of communication, he wants frankness, and he's reasonably frank himself, so that's okay. He's not too worried about diplomacy, but he's very diplomatic himself. And part of that is that reason of he wants to be everybody's friend. In terms of authority, he wants some autonomy. You have to give him plenty of autonomy, but this can be a little bit dangerous because, of the issues the Paradox report pulled up, where he wants plenty of autonomy, but he doesn't balance the risks against the rewards. Wants to take initiative, wants to lead the team, wants to make decisions, but he's not very, very tolerant of structure. So if it's a highly structured organisation, then he won't be the man for you either. In terms of his personal expectations, he wants to be kept informed of what's going on in the company. He wants a capable leader. Now what that means is most people see a capable leader as themselves, so he wants a leader that's like himself. So, my experience is at the C level in organisations that very few people will be the type of person that Andrew is. He wants a lot of personal help from the company, and he's also looking for a stable career. And then in terms of social expectations, wants lots of social opportunities through work. Okay, so he's looking for work. He's a very social animal, and he'll want those, and he's really quite outgoing. In terms of work-life balance, he would like some work-life balance. Flexible work time is not really a big issue for him. He's quite relaxed. He doesn't manage stress very well, but he can tolerate pressure. So you can put him under pressure, and he will meet deadlines and do things, but he'll be quite stressed in doing that. Yeah. So there's some of the things that you can think about in terms of Andrew and how he sits with your company. On balance, I think the summary of him is that he is a very nice guy, probably too nice. His backstory is that he has a background in sales, and he would have made a great salesman because of those interpersonal skills and wanting to be everybody's friend. But as a manager, he's really not going to cut it in your business. He would want to rate very well against the competition for you to offer him the job. I hope this report's been of some use to you, and if you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.